Viviana, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, Joe. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to do this podcast. I find it like a great opportunity to talk with you, and yeah, I'm doing good. It's now quite late. I mean, like it's getting late, but it's nice to talk about creativity like later in the day than morning, I suppose. How are you doing?
I'm good as well. I'm feeling the effects of it being the evening, but I think you have a point about it being sort of easier to talk about late at night rather than when you first woken up. Although I am
I
still
know.
sipping coffee right now, which is probably I'm going to regret later, but I figured that was better than being asleep during trying to interview.
I know. Just half awake, half asleep.
But do you want to introduce yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Viviana Almas, and I am photographer and filmmaker, currently based in London. I have recently graduated from Falmouth University, which is located in Cornwall, of the south of UK, and I come from the background of uh, creative arts, where I studied in Lithuania. So I was born in America, but then I relocated to Lithuania when I was around 3 years old. So I had like a mixture of like different kind of like cultures, like when I was growing up, and was intermixed with different music and different genres of films. So I was like really interested in like exploring the creative art scene. But at the same time, I was spending a lot of time being interested in science, which was like a very like separate kind of like thing, like doing physics and like studying chemistry, and just kind of like being really interested in like more grounded things. So I assume like now, like even though I don't really like think it so much about like physics in my work, but I feel like they're kind of like interlinked very much so in my practice. Yeah, and currently I'm working with photography, printmaking, installation art, and video, and and I feel like those kind of like different mediums, they weren't always apparent in my practice. They kind of like came like in a different periods of life. Like when I went to Falmouth University, I didn't do much printmaking, but then I just kind of like I was like, oh, maybe I should try like different departments, like, and I was just like going to different departments like every day, like just going to the theater and music, then another day going to film department, and then eventually I discovered printmaking department, and the technicians there were great. So I kind of had that opportunity of exploring like how can you use photographs in a different way of doing something in a more physical format rather than just like having a digital version of the image. So I explored a lot, like in screen printing, in photo etching, in also I was doing darkroom printing, but I feel like more kind of having fine art printing was more relevant to how I wanted to represent the photographs, which was a bit more physical in a way.
Hmm.
And then, yeah, later on in university, I started exploring installation art, and moving image was actually back before already apparent in my practice before university, but it was like always back in my mind, like just kind of like having that in my practice, like exploring more through experimental side, not like interlinking with the themes I wanted to present. So yeah, I'm just feel like maybe it's like too much in one go.
This is all good. It's like a good timeline overview of how you sort of move from more when you said you were doing like creative arts and stuff, was that more painting and drawing, or was it always photography and just changing it with these sort of alternative processes?
So when I was doing fine art in Lithuania, that was like a very like a separate school, because in Lithuania we have this kind of like system of going to a separate school for music or fine arts. So additionally, when you go to like a normal school, you apply to another school. So I was just like going there to do sculpture, painting, graphics, and yeah, I think that was about it. And live drawing. Yeah, so it was like different like subjects, and I was more like based on painting, which I kind of like decided to work on more. But I feel like that was just like it really like added up to my practice, like composition wise. Like it made me really think about like more like how I frame things and how I put the ideas out, like my like creative visions, and like how I use color palette. And then photography was, I think like at that time my photography was a bit more like based in fashion, and it wasn't like the kind of like conceptual side was still not there. And so it was like more about like practicing and incorporating different elements from fine art side, like kind of becoming more better at technical side like things. So yeah, I guess like that was really helpful, especially with the teachers. I'm forever grateful for them, that they kind of like led me on the path of learning those kind of like different areas, how I incorporate and blend different mediums from creative arts. Yeah. So that was really useful.
Nice. And then you mentioned about through all this you were sort of developing the themes you explore. Like, do you have a set way of defining those? Because your style is quite distinct. I was just, and especially with conceptual work, there's normally quite interesting things going on behind the scenes that lead to the output. So I'd be curious to know more about that.
Thank you. I feel like for me, it's like I usually try to not overthink, or like come up with the idea beforehand, like not try to make it like pretentious, like like write all up the statement and then do that project. I'm kind of like very like I just make it intuitively. But I feel like the major thing that kind of like formed the ideas I that naturally came into my practice were just watching films and listening to music, but mainly watching films. I was just constantly watching films when I was growing up, and I feel like that kind of like subconsciously, without me knowing it, like they formed me these like dreamscape images that I wanted to recreate in reality. And specifically with the projects like I've been working on throughout university, they were like almost I didn't really like consider that, but later on I kind of like reflected in my university years that it was very much based on time and kind of like thinking more in depth about surroundings and analyzing the images I recreated in my mind based on the experiences. So it's kind of like I feel like the things that I experienced, it kind of like interlink back into my ideas that I wanted to project into the project. And it's interesting because like with the photographs, it's very much like I'm trying not to like overstimulate like the idea. It's more like just putting out the things I perceive in my head, which is I feel like they kind of come across as like it's hard to depict what time or what place it was taken in. So I think it's more based on the dreamscape imagery perceived in my mind.
Interesting. How the sort of the timeline from, like, do they just pop into your head and then you that's the next one, or does it take a while to like formulate into something?
I think they just usually come up. It's really interesting because I really like the time to reflect, and just usually before bed I do like just kind of like deep breeze, and I think everyone has that state before sleeping, and when they receive like kind of like distorted images, and I always try to remember what I see then. And I think it's called hypnagogia, that state when you kind of like before sleeping and before being awake, just like half asleep, half awake. And then like yeah, I usually get most of the images at that time, and then I don't write them down. I think if I would write them down, maybe it would be like I would get more ideas out of it, but usually I just try to remember that, and then recreate when I'm awake, and like like planning wise and all of that, like that comes into the process of producing images. But yeah, usually it's just like very random and unplanned. It's like like you never know what you're gonna catch, like when you go out like into the street from your home, like you never know what's gonna happen. So it's like similar with the thoughts. It's like kind of like hard to track the schedule when it's gonna appear.
Yeah. That's interesting. And then you said as well about like an ongoing project. Is that a similar sort of process, or is that slightly? Because I'd be curious to know, like, you've talked about projects a few times. Do you wait till you've shot a few of these images and then sort of compile them together, or do you have the idea for the project and then you sort of add them to these as they come along?
Usually, well, with the project that I was working on in my university, that I kind of like maybe more contextualized at the end was called Three Associations, and I was curious just about like the perception of. Initially, I was really curious about the perception of art and kind of like radicalizing, like how art should be perceived, and specifically photographs, because I feel usually we kind of like tend to see the photograph like printed with inkjet like on as an inkjet print, and just framed like 5x4 frame, or like very standard like frame, and then just put on the wall. And I was curious like how this could be like taken into a different way of like contextualizing the photograph. And I was exploring the printmaking in that sense, and the installation and the moving image, but it was more like based on like the images I was perceiving and the environment I was in. So as basically I was visiting each location where I took a photograph, and then I took an object from there, and then when I had an installation with my prints, and I just brought all of those objects back into the space. So kind of like just questioning like what is like real, what is not, and like what is photography, and like how art should be perceived. So just like so many like questions I'm curious about, and I think it's so hard like to answer anything in that sense. And it's not only I think with photography, but also like with installation art. Like I'm quite interested how other installation artists like kind of like raise questions about different subjects, and like just kind of like current situation in the world, like when there's so much happening, like how kind of like we present art nowadays, and how we like take what is around us and just like put into the physical format to interact with public and engage. Because I think for me it's really interesting, the engagement part, like when you can talk with the public about like kind of like the perception of art and that area.
Yeah, it's interesting because I guess compared to before, where like the default was something printed, as now the default isn't even like you said about the standard sort of inkjet print. The default was, or the default now is a digital image on a screen. So it's kind of,
Yeah.
it's interesting to be more considered about how you make, you know, something so untangible as like an image in your head into a digital file or an analog file, and then how you present it as well. Is all your photography analog or digital, or do you have strong feelings either way? Because that's always
Well,
interesting to annoy people who are super hardline.
yeah, I think it's a good actually question. I feel like when I was just starting university, I think like a lot of people around me and myself, I was just like strictly just doing analog and nothing else. But then like within the years, I was kind of like thinking, oh, you know, like it's actually like I'm gonna be like graduate and I'm gonna have to pay for developing and I'm gonna have to pay for like scanning and stuff like that. It's like it cost wise, I feel like it's more efficient to shoot digital, and also it's just like the faster way of doing it. So initially, when I started, I was just doing analog. So some of like the photographs of like of my other projects that I've done in my first or second year, or before that, they're analog based. But in my third year, and specifically for that three associations project that I just recently done, most of them are digital, and I just kind of like transition into that, and I think that's why I didn't like the idea of actually like using inkjet print again when you shoot on digital, because for me it's like a lot about physicality of it, and how you can recreate something into a physical shape, specifically like doing photo etching, like having to use metal, like zinc. I'm using zinc etching, so it's like zinc, and it's quite cheap metal to do photographs. So I was just using digital format, and then later on printed photo etchings using zinc material.
Yeah, it's a sort of commonality I found with like a lot of people that I've talked to on the podcast and outside of it. Like when, you know, a lot of people as well, like because of cost, have been sort of moved into digital over the years, who were initially analog photographers, and they all seem to want to find a way to sort of reconcile with something tangible. So like obviously you're doing photo etching and different alternative processes, or some people like for some people the inkjet print is enough, but another common one is like you know, photo books and stuff, which, you know, people we know like Harry and Connor are quite fanatical about that end of things as well. And we interviewed someone on the podcast recently who actually grew up analog and then sort of switched to digital, but has decided to go sort of the same line of logic but taking it the other way, where she's like fully committed to digital, like will not print even the images, and is like just taking digital as its own medium and working in that fully. So it's always interesting to see how other people have like interpreted how to deal with that. Suddenly the digital camera becomes digital files, and there's nothing to hold or look at, as opposed to every other art form where you end up with except maybe like, you know, music and performing arts, but the only visual art form where you kind of lose the object completely.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really good point, specifically with the books, and kind of like making something more tangible that you can flick around instead of like just, you know, pressing the button on computer or any other digital device. And I've been also like the more time has like come like in like the more time I work like within this project and upcoming ones, I'm just like thinking more about like how I could collaborate with different designers and different people making books and zines, like actually bringing the work in a physical format. And yeah, just like also inviting other people to work. I think it's really interesting, like celebrating the paper and celebrating like the printmaking like together. I think that's really interesting. Another like way of doing it.
Yeah, and it seems to be a common, like I've kind of honed in on mainly photographers, but it seems to be a thing that a lot of people in our sort of age group get a sense of, because like everything is, like you say, turning into a screen or a thing you see on a computer and never see in person things. And that's also why you talked like exhibitions and installations as well. They seem to be getting more and more popular because it's a way of getting people actually physically together and actually to see something tangible rather than like, okay, we've made the coolest Instagram post of the year and that be kind of the whole thing of it, you know.
Yeah, and especially now, like with the, sorry if I interrupted,
No,
but
it's all good. It'll be the
it's
internet.
it's just interesting, as you say, like, you know, like actually doing installation and then like putting on Instagram. It's like so fast and rapid, and it kind of like, because it's super like everything is like really, it's like a fast fashion, but it's more like fast art on like Instagram, you know, specifically for artists. They need to like constantly be there or like be aware of like what's happening and follow like the guidelines of like how to, you know, how to like share their artwork. But I feel like that's a really good way of like getting more exposure, but at the same time, it's really hard like of actually having the work like be seen in actual life and have the conversation, which I feel is really important, like actually having the conversation with the public and engaging with them and discussing something like specifically like the topics that they're doing in a more in-depth way.
Yeah, because it is incredible. It becomes not just fast, but like rapid 2 second interaction. As an installation, you can kind of almost trap people there for a little bit longer, you know, just give them the time to actually consider it. But it, yeah, there's never here and there.
Exactly.
Also, as well, you do moving image as well. So for all of that, like discussion about making tangible objects, how do you find that translates to moving image and video? Because that's another one where it can very easily end up on a screen.
Yeah, I'm just gonna quickly turn on the light because I feel like it's
No worries.
Sorry.
It's all good.
So with the moving image, I feel like you asked about the objects as well.
Well, I'd like to hear about your moving image work as a whole, but I was just thinking it's quite interesting. We've talked about making physical objects, but obviously moving image can quickly become an Instagram video, a YouTube video, or...
Oh, right. I see your question. Yeah, I think for the moving image, like I started off by being really interested in this director, Scott Barley, and I just come across his film on Letterboxd. I assume, yeah, it's like that app that every film like fanatic has. But yeah, I was just kind of like looking through to find something like more experimental, and I came across his name, and I was quite surprised that I couldn't find anywhere this film, like only on his website. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. So I eventually got that film and I watched it, and I was just amazed like how different it was to everything I've seen before. And then I got in contact with him just asking how he did it, and he just said like he shot like a slow moving image film at nighttime on iPhone 7, and I was just like amazed that the fact that he shot that film at nighttime with a phone. And that got really me inspired. I was like, oh, so I think anyone can make a film, you know, like with anything. And And I just kind of like started also doing like, in a way, like slow cinema and shooting like also like in nature landscape and experimenting with ambient light, like using no external light. So just like very like no budget films, kind of like just experimenting with the things I had around me. And then when I went to university, I had a great lecture, Dinuli, and I'm also really grateful for the things it has taught me and kind of like led into doing like being interested in fine art and more and analyzing the ideas behind. And he kind of like showed me the artists I didn't really think my work was aligned in the moving image. But he introduced me to like different creatives that were analyzing similar topics and were doing filmmaking in a similar way. And yeah, one of them was Namjoon Paik, and he in 70s and 80s was making lots of experimental moving image with using monitors. So I was also really interested how you can like actually use like digital cameras, but at the same time blending something like blending technology and just kind of like doing like a bit more experimental moving image in a sense of something that is not in a way like specifically like pleasant to look at. It's more like just pure like kind of like idea or like just trying something different. And then I was doing a lot of like kind of like experimental moving image until I did my internship in New York, and I met really interesting people there that were also like just kind of like experimenting with moving image and doing lots of performance art. And I was like interested. I was like, oh, actually, I never like I never done this in analog format. And I just found this course that was happening, and which was in Mononoa Wear Lab, and I went there to like just learn more about the 60mm cameras and the ways of like working with film and like making a bit more like the actual moving image tangible. And there I just like learned the basics, and in that time I was doing stop motion, so just like experimenting in a similar way, like with the same similar ideas I done in Cornwall when I was doing kind of like monitor inspired moving image. And I done similar thing with the stop motion shot on analog cameras in New York. And then I just like continued doing that when I came back to Cornwall using Super 8 and 60mm again. So it was just like a kind of like continuation. And but it was just like pure of like curiosity. I think like I didn't really like try to be popular using the analog format or like kind of like follow the trends, but it just came so natural that I happened to have the analog camera, because I feel like now it's like so popular using analog equipment for the moving image, and everyone is like, specifically in the industry, like you need to like have two things, like 60mm or 8mm camera, and then a camera if you're a photographer. So it's like very, very like on the wave, I feel, using those two things. But yeah, I think like I'm not sure if I answered your question, like the moving image. I think you asked about the physicality of it, and
yeah, which I apologize if I've kind of questioned you into a corner. I just found it interesting because it contrasts with some of it, because it's not as though like everything someone does has to like line up exactly. It's just interesting to know what your like thoughts are around it, because you seem very interested with like photography to make it into a tangible object, as with moving image, it seems like your interests are slightly different.
Yeah, I think it's slightly different. It's not more like I mean a lot of images I usually like come up with the things I want to shoot. They're also kind of like just appear, but it's more usually like when I do moving image, there's like a specific thing I want to say or show in the moving image. So it's like very much based on the idea behind rather than a pure kind of like visual imagery I have in my mind. So it's like coming in that direction. Like, and I think like in terms of physicality, I feel like using film, I feel like it's really interesting. Really interesting way of working because it's not only like I mean like everyone's also down.
Ooh.
I mean that's true, but it's another way when you do a moving, it kind of like makes you think a lot about the passage of time. It's like you can really like feel when the time is going because you can hear the film like rolling, and it's just like really interesting way of kind of like knowing that there's something physical that you can later on like even edit yourself like in a physical format and then project again. So it's like so many layers of working with that, which I really enjoy. And yeah, even like the recent film another film, the music video I shot was shot in 60mm, and when I'm editing, I'm like just now like thinking, oh, you know, like if it was shot on digital, I'm not sure if I would have enjoyed it so much, like the actual process of it, like thinking about the actual passage of time rather than just like what I want to shoot instead. Like it's there's like another layer of like interacting with what you have in front of you.
Yeah, and I guess they become very different ways of thinking. Same as analog versus digital photography. You have to kind of it's just different experience because obviously you can't see it there in the moment. You're concerned about different things at different times, and it always changes sort of output a little bit. And there's always that excitement with film that, like, you know, there's always a bit of an uncertainty, and I imagine that's similar with a moving image, like a video equivalent of that, which as well, because it's interesting because although you might have shot the exact same thing on digital, the process of it becomes very different, and more of a struggle.
Yeah, it's like there's more to it. Like it's not easy. Like specifically like if you have like something specifically in mind, then you want to like actually like make it look in a certain way, and you don't do that like when you're actually shooting with the camera, then it's like another thing you need to do it either in a digital format like editing. So it's like taking away, like you still need to use digital in the end.
Yeah, because I assume you're editing it together digitally, not cutting film
I know,
reels together.
yeah, like this time I'm editing digitally, but the previous ones I've done, the first films I shot, I don't think I even considered that option of editing in a digital format because we had a deadline to show our films in the cinema, and I remember I was like, oh, so we're not gonna have it scanned and edit that. And and the actual workshop people, they were just like, they said, oh, if you want to edit, you can edit it manually, like just like, you know, with the editor. So it's basically cutting and taping it together and then scratching the film if like there was certain things you wanted to do. So that takes a while as well. But I feel like it's more rewarding to see when that you actually done it, you know, like it's not in front of you, it's more like it's still small, like the film is so small, so you kind of like have to be very like just like careful with like that kind of stuff and be more maybe attentive, and you don't have necessarily so many options of like making it blurry or like doing those kind of like post effects in reality versus digital. So it's less things you can kind of like put into the physical editing, but it's more rewarding, I would say. It's really nice.
That's cool. And then, because you said you had an opportunity to display in a cinema at uni, which is really cool, and we said we wanted to touch on a little bit of whether you thought university was actually, as a creative person, like worth doing, because that's something we have people come into the studio all the time and ask us about, because both me and Alex went to uni, but we know a lot of people who didn't as well, so it's interesting to kind of get perspectives on that.
Yeah, well, initially when I went to university, I just thought, oh, like I don't need the university, like I could just go on my own and do my own thing. But I feel like it really depends what you want to get. Like for me, like at the end, I realized that time, those 3 years, was really beneficial, being an education system and then having specifically the access to the facilities and having to have lecturers and technicians around that like you can talk and that have like similar kind of like ideas that you can like actually discuss in person, which was really helpful. And it gives this like some sort of like freedom in a way, like of experimenting, just having that time on your own, like to do your own thing. I think it's really good. And obviously like meeting like-minded students is really great, like which you can later collaborate and do projects together. I think that specifically applies to films and even photography, where you're like you need bigger team to create something. But on the other hand, I think with universities, it's like I think a lot of things are changing now, and I think because like the whole industry is changing, and I think like the market of university is becoming a bit more, in a way, like capitalistic. Like I feel like students are being like most of the time perceived as figures. So because of that, I think the university might not necessarily be like as it was before, but I think it's still an amazing place to meet, like engage with creatives and meet new people and just grow in a fast way, like in a creative path. Just find yourself in a better way. But that having said, I feel like just one needs to choose university that applies to their goals and the things that they want to do. So it's like all about kind of like figuring out like what they want to do. Like the student, I feel like either they want to like use the facilities or really learn something, because a lot of things you learn after university, like having that real life experience, like even like me, like doing when I went to do the internship, I just really wanted to do it, and like I just did it outside university, so it kind of allowed me to like grow in a creative way faster, and engage with the actual kind of like actual world, and think a bit more about like outside the comfort zone in a way.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's that important part of finding a uni that fits you. Because and especially in photography as well, because doing a photography course isn't like standardized across the country. And I know like doesn't Falmouth have about 3 or 4 photography courses that are all specialized in different ways? So as well, like if you ended up on the wrong one, you're gonna you're gonna have issues. But it's like you say as well, I think the important part is like if for people who don't go to uni or choose not to, it's also like finding ways to learn still and push your practice forwards, as some can kind of not grow because they didn't go to uni and just try and like stay exactly where they are rather than trying to keep progressing.
Yeah, I think it's like all about with the creativity. Like it's like daunting, like being in reality and having to do your thing and having to like have live a life and like balance everything. But it's just like all about finding the right kind of like space to do it and right people that can like support you throughout and like mentors. I think having like mentors after university is really good, like someone that can actually like put you on a path of like continuing your practice and evolving and still like keep learning the new things whilst you don't have access to everything, to all the departments for experimentation. I think that's like, yeah, a crucial thing. Just like keep going. I think like don't stop with the when you're like not in university. Like kind of like don't see that as all only option, since it's not accessible to everyone. And yeah, it's just like there's so many ways of being creative without being in the education system.
Cool. So before we sort of wrap up, where do you see your practice going in sort of the next, well, future, where like what's in the sort of pipeline?
Um, so at the moment, I'm looking actually at studying masters, um, either in Europe or in somewhere place else. So I think after a masters, I'm just thinking of carrying on my doing practice and doing teaching later on, which I feel it would be really rewarding, like to have someone like to pass the knowledge or pass just interact with the people that want to like learn something and bring something to the physical world. I think that's my aim and goal. And within that, I want to carry on with my practice of specifically interacting with different parts of the world and doing the three associations at the moment, just like engaging with the space and the objects around me and just questioning like within that project, like the perception of time and the kind of like the idea of art and being like creative, like just raising the questions about what is art and how do we understand its physical representation and the depiction of that in reality in the not in non-linear time. So I feel like that's my practice, like ideas that I want to develop, and obviously like long-term goals, just teaching like and giving something back
Yeah.
to the world.
Nice.
Not just taking.
Very cool. Is there anything else you want to add or shout out before we stop recording, or anything at all?
Well, I really want to thank you, Joe. It was a great opportunity to talk with you, and obviously you done great podcasts before, so I feel very honored to be on one of your podcasts. Obviously, uh,
I
I
mean,
guess
thank you for coming
we'll
on, but it's also
well
Alex as well who helps, and Lucy for half of them
yeah,
too.
all of the
So
team.
it's a team
Yeah,
effort, I
Alex
think, even if
and
I'm sat here.
yeah, all of the team. Like, thank you guys so much. It was really great to be on board, and hopefully we'll come back with Connor and Harry to talk about the ongoing collective.
Definitely, that would be,
So
because I didn't know anything about that until now. I think Connor's coming back in the near future, but yeah, you've maybe, are you going to get told off by them for releasing secret info?
no, I think it's nothing is secret. Everything is open.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. And it's
Sweet.
been interesting to find out a bit more about your work and what you do. But yeah, I think we're good to wrap
Well,
up.
thank you for great questions, and yeah, we'll we'll speak in next episode.
Sounds good. Right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.